The hum of the servers was the only constant in Dr. Alistair Finch's laboratory. It was a low, vibrational thrum that you felt in your teeth, the sound of a million tiny thoughts being processed at once. My own thoughts were much quieter. I stood before his desk, a glass and steel monolith in the center of a room with a panoramic view of the Hudson River. The afternoon sun glinted off the water, but in here, everything was cold. "Leo," he began, steepling his fingers. He didn't look at me, but at the data I'd projected onto the wall screen behind me. It was a swirling, complex simulation of neural pathways responding to a custom-designed protein, my life's work, or the beginning of it. This is ambitious. In his world, ambitious was a 4-letter word. It meant unfundable. It meant career suicide. "I believe the model is sound, Dr. Finch," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "The AI isn't just crunching data. It's learning. It's predicting cellular behavior with an accuracy that bypasses years of conventional trial and error. We could model degenerative diseases, tailor treatments to a person's specific genetic code." He finally turned his gaze on me. His eyes were pale blue, like chips of ice. "You're talking about science fiction, Leo. You're a talented data analyst, but you are not a bioarchitect. You're asking for a significant portion of this lab's resources to chase a fantasy. You want an AI to talk to cells?" He gave a short, dry laugh that was more of a cough. "It's ridiculous." The word hung in the sterile air between us. Ridiculous. It wasn't a critique. It was a dismissal. He swiped his hand across his tablet, and my beautiful swirling galaxy of neural pathways vanished from the wall, replaced by his pristine, empty desktop. The meeting was over. I walked out of the lab without a word, the hum of the servers following me down the hall. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, all 34 flights, feeling the burn in my legs, letting the physical pain crowd out the cold knot of humiliation in my stomach. By the time I reached the lobby, my resolve had hardened into something solid and sharp. That Sunday was my father's birthday. The whole family was crammed into his small house in Astoria, the one I grew up in. The air was thick with the smell of my mother's tomato sauce and the sound of my uncles arguing about the Mets. It was a world away from the silent, air-conditioned austerity of the lab. My Uncle Sal, a man whose hands were permanently stained with motor oil and whose opinions were as loud as his laugh, cornered me by the refrigerator. "So, Leo the big-shot scientist," he boomed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder, "when you gonna cure cancer already, huh?" I managed a weak smile. "Working on it, Uncle Sal." My father came over, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked tired, but his eyes were kind. "How's work, son?" I took a breath. I hadn't told them I'd quit on Friday. "I left the lab," I said, my voice quiet. The chatter in the room seemed to dip for a second. "I'm going to start my own project." My mother paused, a ladle full of sauce hovering over a pot. "Start your own? But Dr. Finch's lab, it's so prestigious." I tried to explain my idea, the same one I had pitched to Finch. I used smaller words, simpler analogies. I talked about a smart computer program that could help doctors understand sickness on a level they never could before. The more I talked, the more their faces clouded over with a familiar brand of loving incomprehension. "A computer program?" my father said, frowning. "Like for accounting?" "No, Pop. It's a predictive intelligence. It builds models of living cells." Uncle Sal let out a bark of laughter. "What, like a video game?" "You're gonna play doctor on a computer screen?" He turned to my father. "Frank, what did I tell you? Too much school, not enough real world. Your son wants to build a crystal ball for molecules?" He wasn't being cruel, not intentionally. In his world, you built things with your hands. You fixed engines. You laid drywall. You drove a truck. You didn't build invisible things inside a machine. To him, my dream wasn't just ambitious. It was nonsensical. A joke. My cousin Marco snickered. Yeah, Leo, maybe it can predict the lottery numbers for us while you're at it. The room filled with laughter. It wasn't the cold, sharp dismissal of Dr. Finch. It was worse. It was worn, familiar, and suffocating. It was the laughter of people who loved me, but who saw my passion as a childish delusion. I looked at my father. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't defending me either. He just had a look of profound disappointment, the look of a man who'd hoped his son would get a safe job with a good pension, and was now watching him throw it all away on a fantasy. I didn't say anything else. I ate my mother's lasagna in silence, the rich, familiar taste turning to ash in my mouth. I felt the same way I did on the stairs at the lab, a quiet, burning resolve. They didn't get it. None of them. That was okay. I would make them see. The next 6 years were a blur of cheap coffee, ramen noodles, and the pale blue glow of a computer screen. I moved to a tiny studio apartment in Mountain View, California, a place that smelled of stale air and desperation. I funneled my entire life savings into server time and hardware. I coded for 18 hours a day, slept for 4, and spent the other 2 applying for grants and funding, collecting rejections like they were trading cards. The world outside my window barely registered. I became a ghost haunting my own life. My mother would call, her voice tight with worry. "Are you eating, Leo? You sound so thin. Maybe you should come home. Sal said he could get you a job with the union." Each call was a fresh wave of doubt. They thought I was failing. Maybe I was. There were nights I'd stare at the lines of code until they blurred into meaningless symbols, the sheer crushing weight of my ambition threatening to bury me. My AI, which I'd named Cassandra, felt more like a demanding ghost than a brilliant partner. It consumed everything and gave nothing back. The breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I had been running a deep simulation on a particularly aggressive form of glioblastoma, a notoriously difficult brain cancer. For months, Cassandra had been failing, producing chaotic, useless models. But this time, something was different. I had rewritten a core learning algorithm, feeding it a dataset from a completely unrelated field of protein folding. I watched, bleary-eyed, as the model began to coalesce. It wasn't chaotic. It was elegant. It spun into a 3-dimensional structure on my screen, a glowing, intricate web of cellular pathways. And then it did something it had never done before. It highlighted a single overlooked protein receptor. It flagged a cascade of cellular signals that every existing model had missed. It suggested a combination of 2 obscure, pre-existing drugs that in theory would block that cascade completely. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was just a simulation. It could be a fluke, a ghost in the machine. I spent the next 2 weeks frantically trying to disprove it. I ran the simulation 1,000 times. I checked every line of code. In 72% of cases where patients had been coincidentally treated with a similar drug combination for other ailments, tumor growth had slowed dramatically. The correlation was there. It was real. That was the beginning. I sent my findings to a researcher at Stanford, a woman named Eris Thorne, whose papers I had admired for years. I expected another rejection. Instead, I got a call 2 hours later. Her voice was electric with excitement. She saw what Finch and my family couldn't. She saw the future. With her validation, everything changed. We secured a small round of seed funding. We rented a tiny office above a laundromat. We hired 2 other brilliant, hungry young scientists who didn't mind working for equity and pizza. We called our company Aethelred Labs. The next few years were still a struggle, but it was a different kind. It was the struggle of creation, not of desperation. Cassandra grew more powerful with every dataset we fed her. We moved from modeling cancer to predicting autoimmune disorders to identifying potential Alzheimer's